How many of us actually feel loving towards our husbands or our wives?
Sometimes.
You think about the last time you had an argument. You just think about that for a moment. Can you put yourself back there, the last time you had an argument? Did you feel very loving then? Right at that time you were arguing? No, okay.
But it only for me it only lasts a brief moment. Before
And there's the intellectual justification.
Yeah, and it used to last a lot longer, but now it's a bit transient because I put another spin on it.
And that's the problem.
And I say, well, it's my choice that I act like that.
And that's the problem. That's the problem. You see, what we do with our soul is, here's our soul, right? Here's our soul. The emotion that we're feeling at the moment inside of our soul is anger. Let's say, in this case, it's anger with a man, right? So then I go down the road of saying to myself, all right, I've got this anger, but really, this is only a little situation, so I can convince myself it's small. Or I can say to myself, oh, really, this is not that important, so I can convince myself now that my anger isn't that important. And I go down this track of convincing myself away from the feeling that's really there. Now, many of you have got into that habit because this is what the New Age movement generally teaches you to do, right? It teaches you to do this. Here's where I am right now. Here's where I know I should be if I'm in a state of love. So here's the state of love that I'm aiming for sometime in the future. And what I do is I intellectually jump from one place to the other and in the process ignore this emotional baggage in between. You follow me? And what I'm suggesting to you is totally the opposite to that. What I'm suggesting to you is if you want this to be real, this state of love to be real, this emotional baggage is going to have to be experienced and released from you. Then that state will be automatic and you won't have to try to put any spins on it. You won't have to try to skip over to it. You won't have to try to intellectualise yourself to that point. It will just be an automatic place that you live in constantly without it trying at all. Does that appeal to you? To do it without trying?
Anger doesn't have to be a negative emotion.
Sorry?
Anger doesn't have to be a negative emotion, and you can have both of those emotions together.
That is another spin you've put on it. To be honest, right? The spin is that anger. What is anger really?
Fear.
It's fear, suppressed fear, right? So the truth is that when I'm in a state of anger, right? Here's my anger. I have already put a cap on my fear.
Yeah.
Right? I've already done that. Now, how does God want you to live your life? To put a cap on any emotion?
No.
No. So let's say, what is my fear?
Yes.
That is where I've put a cap on something else that I don't want to experience. Let's say it's terrible, like, how do you spell grief? Grief. Right? Right? So what I'm doing with my life, if I say to myself, oh, anger's not such a bad thing, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing, I'm just saying it's there, it's present, and it means that I've already suppressed myself. I've already suppressed my soul if I'm in a state of anger, no matter what anger I'm feeling. It might be just a smidge of frustration. It might be just a smidge of annoyance, but it's still a suppression. You follow me? And because I've suppressed what's underneath, which is some fear about feeling some deeper emotions underneath, and underneath there might be terrible feelings, like really dark feelings of, I feel like I'm empty inside, right? Or I feel like I'm unworthy inside, or, some really big, dark emotions might be there. And what we have a tendency to do then is just cover that one with that, cover that one with that, cover that one with that, and then tell ourselves that that's fine.
I still think that you can have all of those things and acknowledge all of those things, and still have love as well.
No, well, the truth is, right at that moment while this is in you, if you can acknowledge them, but if you're not choosing to experience them, then what's happening is the world is experiencing them for you. You are projecting it straight out onto the world. You follow me? So you can say, oh, I know these things are in me, but that doesn't help you. Knowing them doesn't help you. Experiencing them is the thing that helps you. It's the experience that will cause you to grow. On all of the New Age paths that are around today, pretty much, all of them tell you or teach you how to avoid your experience. And I mean skip over your true emotional experience. You remember in the DVDs, how many of you saw the Second Days DVDs? Yeah? Do you remember that there was a channeling in there of Lucinda? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And Lucinda said that she was in the sixth sphere of spiritual development, right, which was in this intellectual place, right, of the highest amount of development in natural love that you can achieve without God.
And that was where the ego resided.
And that's where, the ego resides and so forth. And she was in this place, and what she realised was that she wasn't being real about what emotions really existed within her. And she had to actually go down to a place in the third sphere where she learnt what emotions were within her. And when she learnt what emotions were within her, she was quite surprised, because she had intellectualised herself over them. You follow me?
Mm.
And what I'm suggesting to you is don't do that. Don't do that. It's a fictitious progression. It's not real. Now, you can feel that a lot when you go to different places or different people, groups of people, and you can feel sometimes, can't you? That, hang on a sec, this person's got a nice, happy face. They seem like they're acting nicely towards me, but I can feel this really yucky thing coming from them at the same time. What's that? Right? You notice that sometimes, how it feels fake?
Yeah.
Well, you need to trust that it is fake. And it's fake because the person has skipped over their experience and manufactured a condition of love intellectually, but there's all these bottled up emotions suppressed in there as well. And with God, you're not going to be able to do that, which is fair enough, isn't it? Like, do you think God would want you to do that? In the end? God would want you to just feel everything you feel in there. Yeah? So if you choose to look at any of these feelings and then reason them away, or tell yourself that there's stuff fine within you, that's fine. You can tell yourself anything you like. You've got free will. But the truth is, what you'll be doing is skipping over the experience of these emotions, and it's the skipping over of the experience of them that causes you to attract the same events in your life time after time after time.
Is what you're saying, if you say you have a flash of anger,
Yep.
you feel that and you stay with it and you sort of suck what you can out of it, and then you might find fear underneath that, and then you go progressively down like that.
That's right, and progressively just ask yourself, if I'm angry, there's something underneath that. So I can even just say to myself, I'm angry and it's got nothing to do with this situation, it's got something to do with what's inside of me right now, something underneath that I don't want to experience. And you don't even have to know what that is at this point really yet. Right? When you have become more desirous of feeling what's underneath, you'll automatically feel it. Right? But allow yourself to see the truth, and that is that these things are happening. Don't start intellectualising this and say, oh, but anger's fine, you know. Everything's fine. Do you feel fine when you're angry? Really?
No.
No. So is it fine, really?
No.
No. Do you know what I mean? You don't feel fine when you're there, so why would you ever want to be there? Right? And I'm not saying you won't be there, because you will. Every time you suppress a fear inside of you, you will get angry. Every time. So every time, I asked you to put up your hand about whether you had an argument last week with your partner. Most of you said yes. So what was happening right at that time? What was happening right at that time was you were suppressing a fear. What was the fear you were suppressing? Does anyone want to talk about it?
Yeah, I wasn't being heard.
You wasn't being heard. And how does that feel when you're not heard?
Terrible.
Yeah.
Anger, I was frustrated and I was angry, and it's like, you're not listening, you're not hearing.
Okay. You know what you need to do instead? Feel not heard. Just go into the tears of feeling not heard. Go into the grief of that. And when you release that emotion, automatically everyone around you will start hearing you. But at the moment, if you think about your life, there's a lot of people, particularly men, who are not hearing you. And if you link it back, you'll see that it even goes back to your father not hearing you.
Born with the wrong ear tag, you know. Children need to be seen and not heard. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that is the actual core emotion you need to experience. When you experience that core emotion, your husband will automatically start hearing you. And if you don't believe me, try that. And I'll give you some examples in my own
Let's
life.
try that, because that happens to me.
Yep.
Not
Yeah.
all the time, but...
So the emotion that's being covered over by the anger is the fear. The fear that was covering over the feeling of, in this case, I'm not heard.
And it goes back to that worthy or unworthy thing of then I'm not worth.
I'm not worth being heard.
That's it.
Right? That's the child emotion.
Yeah.
And what I need to do is feel that emotion. And ironically, not only will all of this anger and fear all just automatically disappear, but so will my law of attraction disappear. And what will happen from now on is I will be heard. And the reason why I'm not being heard is I need to not be heard to trigger that emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah? Once I trigger that emotion and I release it completely, I'll be in a state where I'll no longer have that emotion in me. And when I no longer have that emotion in me, I will no longer attract not being heard. I will attract the opposite. I will now be heard. Can I give you a few examples in my own life where these things have happened? Yeah. I was flying back from the US, from the UK actually, back to Australia. And I always check to make sure that the meals are right, you know, because I'm vegan, so I don't eat meat and I don't eat dairy products generally. And so I normally order vegan meals on my flight. So I did all that. I've got Mary, my girl, with me, and we're both sitting next to each other. And I ordered the same meals for her because she's vegan too. And then, lo and behold, you know, the whole 747, it was full of 350 people, gets fed, and I'm the only one without a meal. I don't get a meal. And Mary says, you know, say something. And I'm saying no. No, if I say something, then that's just skipping over the fact that I attracted this. I attracted not getting a meal. Right? I need to look at that. I need to feel about what feeling I feel when I didn't get this meal. That's what I need to do. And then she gets a bit upset with me saying, well, you've just been a martyr now, you know. And I said, no. I need to feel this emotion. So I go into the emotion, and for about 20 minutes or so, have a cry on the plane. You can get away with crying on the plane quite easy. You know, you're flying somewhere, so you might have been missing someone, you never know. Anyway, so I was crying on the plane, and I cried for about 15 or 20 minutes, and the emotions I connected to were being overlooked and uncared for. So I just connected to those emotions. And one emotion that came up for me as well during this time was a feeling that I've been giving myself for free to others all the time, and yet nobody seems to want to give me anything, even when I've ordered it. Right? So I went through that emotion as well. And two stewards come up and said, oh, you didn't get a meal. So I never had to put up my hand on it. They just came up to me. And I said, no, I didn't get one. They said, what would you like? And I said, I'd like a bowl of, pumpkin soup or something like that, and a big salad if you've got one. Like I was going to get it, and they said, no worries, we'll see what we can do. And they came back 5 minutes later with a meal from first class with exactly those things that I'd said. Yeah.
Ask and you shall receive.
Well, it's not so much that. I had to first process the emotion that caused the whole event in the first place.
But then it happened.
Then it happened.
Yes.
Right? I had to release from myself the underlying causal emotion first.
Own it with ownership.
Yeah, and completely, which means to experience it, not to skip over it.
Feel it, to heal it.
To feel it, yeah. Right? Now, I can give you lots of different examples of that if you want. Do you want more?
Yeah.
Have you got some examples of your own? Oh, we've done that.
Well, AJ, my biggest problem is frustration. I get incredibly frustrated with myself.
Okay, frustration is an anger-based emotion. This time it's with yourself.
Yeah.
Why?
I've never quite worked it out, but I think it probably goes back to unworthiness, particularly as a child, because I was sexually abused by a family friend, and it took me a long time, and I could tell nobody because I was only 7 and I was living with relatives.
Can I stop you? Because you're going to tell the story now, and you don't need to. Let's just stop for a moment. feel the emotion that you're going to describe by the story rather than telling the story. Just let yourself feel it now for a moment. Just tune into the feeling, right? The feeling is that I want to blame myself. You're feeling frustrated with you, so you then feel you must be to blame for something.
Yeah, I always felt I should have been able to prevent it, and I didn't know how.
Okay. So go into the emotion that you actually feel, that you are to blame for the abuse that happened to you. Actually feel that. Let yourself feel that you are to blame. So it's not about saying, I can tell you you're not to blame all you want, but in the end it's not going to help you feel the fact that you are to blame. That's what you feel inside of yourself. When you feel that completely, you will know that you weren't to blame, right? But you first need to feel that other emotion, the emotion that you've been carrying around all those years from childhood, and that causes a lot of your self-judgment. Yeah, because you do believe you are to blame. You have a lot of self-shame that you were to blame. That somehow you created the events. Yeah, it's related to what you were told as well.
Yes.
At the time,
Yeah.
if you think about what you were told. at the time.
Well, yes. I mean, every mother used to say to their daughter, "Don't let a man touch you." And I mean, it was hounded into you. It was, dished up for breakfast, dinner, and tea.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things inside of yourself that you need to allow yourself to feel about that self-shame that you have. When you feel the self-shame and release that, then you won't keep blaming yourself for other things that happen in your life. But all of these emotions that are locked up in you are very childlike emotions, right? And this is why we want to skip over them all the time. Because when you're feeling a childlike emotion, how does it feel? Childlike. Does that feel powerless? Or powerful? Which one? Powerless. How many of you like feeling powerless? No one, right? And so what do we go for instead? The powerful emotion. The powerful emotions are like, this is where we think they are. We think anger and all that is the powerful, but in reality it's not actually. The most powerful emotion you can feel is the actual causal emotion. Experience that, release that, and you will no longer attract any of those events. And you'll also not have that emotion inside of you ever again.